Welcome back. The Regional Anti-Corruption Conference kicked off in Luderitz today. The conference will tackle government's risks in oil, gas and green hydrogen, the challenges faced in the public procurement sector, as well as leveraging the Access to Information Act against corruption. Joining us via Zoom to unpack this is the Executive Director of the Institute for Public Policy Research, Mr. Graham Hopwood. Graham, good evening and thank you for joining us here on the Daily Roundup.
Good evening, Nina. Good to be with you.
Graham, just to start with, perhaps you could share some of the objectives and key themes of the Regional Anti-Corruption Conference and what motivated the IPPR to organize this conference.
Well, this is actually the third Regional Anti-Corruption Conference that we've held. So we've already had conferences in Walvis Bay and Gababis. And obviously, when we looked at the south, and that was our next destination, Luderitz made a lot of sense because it's the sort of centre of activity in many ways in Namibia at the moment, with the green hydrogen developments and the oil and gas developments, which are all exciting and potentially transformative for the town and the Karas region. Mm-hmm. But of course, all big projects, they do carry some corruption risks. So we decided to look at those as two of our main themes for the anti-corruption conference. And then, as you said, we looked also at the Access to Information Law, which we expect to be implemented at some point this year. It's moving forward. Regulations are coming into being. I think we'll soon start the process of appointing an information commissioner. Mm-hmm. And then we've looked at something that IPPR has looked at over the years, which is the implementation of the public procurement law and how effective that is in preventing corruption.
Speaking of public procurement, could you share some of the challenges faced within this sector and how these challenges could be addressed?
My colleague Federico Links is the expert on that. But to summarize what he was saying at the conference, one of the big problems is that we have really a very good law, the Public Procurement Act that was passed in 2015, and then an amended law that was passed last year and is being implemented as we speak. So I think we have good, transparent systems, but I think the different public entities that are supposed to follow it, that's basically the ministries and offices and agencies of government, but also the state-owned enterprises and local authorities and so on. Mm-hmm. They have capacity issues, which makes it difficult for them to comply with all the elements in terms of publishing their annual procurement plans and making all the details of their procurement decisions clear. So I think at our latest assessment, only 15% of all the public entities are up to date in terms of publishing this, and this lack of sort of transparent, up-to-date information does create potential corruption risks. I know it's something that the Ministry of Finance and the procurement policy units within the Ministry of Finance are aware of, trying to rectify. But when it's capacity issues, it usually costs money to fix it, so it's taking some time.
Well, as you mentioned, of course, Namibia is on the cusp of becoming, a leader in the oil and gas, green hydrogen sector, with Luderitz being the hub of these new emerging industries. How will the conference address these unique challenges of combating corruption, and what role does, governance play in this?
Well, I think with both green hydrogen and oil and gas, the key approach is to use President Geingob's phrase that transparency plus accountability equals trust, and to try and to put that into action, because to prevent corruption in both of those energy sectors, we need to have as much transparency as possible. So this obviously applies to green hydrogen. There's not perhaps at the moment the necessary levels of transparency around the project. I know it's in its early stages, so it's not possible to release all the information. But I think the community of Luderitz, clearly, because the people who attended our conference today are a little bit feeling left out and in the dark about the green hydrogen developments, and also to some extent about oil and gas. Oil and gas poses perhaps more serious corruption risks because we know what's happened in other countries where oil discoveries are often synonymous with corruption, or they lead to corruption a few years later. So we have to do what we can to make sure that corruption, or resource curse, as it's sometimes called, does not enter the emerging Namibian industry. And I think Namibia is in a good position to stop corrupt elements entering, because we are a democracy, we have an open society, we have a free press. We can expose and challenge some of the things that might be taking us in the wrong direction. Whereas countries in West Africa, for example, where there was really bad corruption some years back related to oil discoveries, they were at the time, authoritarian military dictatorships, and corruption happened, under the guise of darkness, really, because there wasn't any democracy functioning. So we're in a good position to take on these challenges, but we would like to see more commitment to transparency in both green hydrogen and oil and gas going forward. That's why we've recommended joining the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, or EITI, which is mentioned in Harambee as an objective in the second Harambee plan. And the Ministry of Mines is currently looking at that. But we think that would be the easiest and quickest way to reach a higher level of transparency, which would help to protect us against corruption in the future.
In addition to that, are there any specific strategies that will be discussed during the conference, to tackle corruption effectively?
Well, we've talked also about the need to update our legislation and policies in general, because if you look at, say, petroleum legislation, it's generally dating from the early 1990s, and it needs to be overhauled and especially brought up to the global standards on transparency and accountability. So looking at legal reforms, we particularly wanted to encourage people to utilize the access to information law as soon as it's operational, to get the information that they need, but it may also be the information that they need about companies and the way they operate, or government decisions, or even licenses and contracts which government enters to, which should become available according to the access to information law. So, that those things are there, and the law is there to be utilized by the public to make sure that we have as much information as we need in order to develop the country, but also to prevent bad things happening and negative trends like corruption. So we have discussed a whole range of things, including community mobilization. We feel ordinary Namibians need to be more involved in the fight against corruption. We had the Public Education Officer of the Anti-Corruption Commission, Johanna Absalom, also speaking to us about the importance of Namibians supporting the National Action and Strategy Plan against corruption. So, there's a lot that can be done also at the community level and the individual level as well, to make sure that we, not just maintains its reputation for being well governed, but actually improves it as well.
Graham, how will the IPPR ensure that the discussions and insights from the conference translate into actionable policies, and also equally ensuring that the benefits, of oil and gas and green hydrogen goes to the Namibian people?
Well, these are all on our research agenda, so we'll continue to publish briefing papers and research papers on these issues, with the hope of influencing public policy and possibly legislation in these areas. This particular conference was part of our Integrity Namibia project, and that, as I say, has a sequence of conferences. We will have one other regional conference, probably in Oshakati and Dangwa in July, and then we are planning a national conference on corruption early next year. And we hope that out of that we'll create a network of ordinary Namibians who are concerned about corruption and prepared to take action against corruption in their personal lives, but also in their organizations or their workplaces. So it's basically trying to build up a higher level of mobilization amongst the communities and ordinary Namibians in terms of their concern around corruption.
Mr. Graham Hopwood, that's all the time we have, but thank you so much for joining us here on the Daily Roundup. Thank you for your time.
Great, thanks very much, Nina.
That was Graham Hopwood speaking to us, the Executive Director of the IPPR. We'll be right back after this brief break and our conversations continue.